Hi everyone, and welcome to Forest.chat, where we talk about individual endeavour in Western Australia, what it takes, what it means, and how you do it. I'm your host, Paul Vandermeer, and in today's episode, we'll be talking with Nick Theodore about music, the highest form of magic. Nick took some guitar lessons as a teenager, went on to study a semester of music composition at university, and then is self-taught from there. He's taken part in 4 different bands over time. And welcome to Forest.chat, Nick.
Thanks, Paul. It's good to be here.
It's great to have you here, Nick. Now, you've had some guitar lessons in the past. What are you playing now?
I'll be playing bass guitar in this new band, which actually our first jam is tonight. So there's a coincidence for you. I didn't expect that. So yeah, that'll be good fun to play with a new drummer, an unknown drummer, I should say, and Elodie, my friend, who I've been jamming with her for a couple of years now.
So it's a 3-piece band that you're...
Yeah, it'll be a 3-piece, and we'll see what happens down the road.
So Nick, what inspired you to take up music?
Yeah, well, actually, I've got a very definite start point for that. And it happened when I was 14, and it happened very soon after my father had passed away. He passed away in July, and I think a couple of months later, I wanted a guitar. I wanted an electric guitar. That's all I really wanted. And yet before then, I didn't really care. So it was a very strange circumstance. My dad had always wanted, he was a sort of a wannabe musician, and he really wanted me to play drums. He was always asking me if I wanted to play drums. I didn't care. Wasn't interested when I was 12, 13, whatever. And then suddenly, after he'd passed away, a couple of months later, I was just desperate to play guitar. And that's what happened.
Oh, that's a pretty interesting and poignant connection with music.
Yeah. I felt that somehow by playing guitar, I'd somehow be closer to him, and I'm not sure why or how, but I just honestly felt that way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's almost like a tribute.
Yeah, it seemed to be. I didn't go around telling people about it, but it's always been that way for me. Yeah, he was always asking me if I wanted to play drums. Don't know why I didn't start playing drums. So there you go. But no, I just wanted a guitar, so I pestered Mum, and she wound up buying me a Sunburst Stratocaster copy, Ibanez Stratocaster copy from Sutton's in Melbourne.
And then how did you learn to play?
Well, I went and got some lessons. Well, actually, around the same time, myself and my 3 mates at high school, we for some reason, one of my mates who played guitar invited me to join this band, a band, and I agreed. And of course, at that, I wasn't a musician then at all, and neither was he. So it was strange, We just all suddenly wanted to be in a band. We were inspired by the same band called Status Quo. You've probably heard of them.
Yeah, I have. Yep.
An old boogie rock band or whatever, yeah, back in the 70s, late 60s, 70s. They had a big hit called Pictures of Matchstick Men in 69, I think. And then later on they went on to more, boogie rock kind of stuff. And we saw them playing concert in Melbourne, and that sort of blew my 14-year-old mind. And I just wanted to be like them.
Yeah, I'll bet.
So
for all sorts of reasons, I'm sure.
For lots of reasons, yeah. I think we were just discovering females too around that point, coincidentally, yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. So, Nick, it's an interesting story, and Status Quo played a part in that.
Big part, yeah, big part.
What does it take to actually get in there and play an instrument in a band?
When you're 14, your hormones start to bubble up, and I think you become a bit desperate. You're trying to desperately figure out ways to attract the Sheilas. I think that's what it comes down to for a man, for a male. So I was pretty crap at sports. It's funny because I loved football, but football didn't love me. I loved playing British Bulldog. That was fun.
Yep.
You remember that game?
Yeah, we had British Bulldog. Yep.
Yeah, that was my favourite game on the oval. Probably.
I think they banned it while I was playing it.
Yeah, it was very rough. Yeah, and I think I just liked the rough games, and I was possibly too rough for football. I'm not sure. Maybe I got a bit too angry or something. I'm not sure. But anyway, football didn't invite me with open arms. But like I said, this sort of, strange thing happened, and I just decided I wanted to play guitar. And I wanted to play lead guitar. I was quite firm about that, even though I couldn't play anything. So that's another strange situation. And what it takes is, I think, number one, I think it takes self-confidence to actually begin to see yourself as a musician, for me anyway. I mean, other people wouldn't care about it, but for me, I cared very deeply about that. And in fact, for the first few years, I felt kind of just like guilty walking into a music shop.
Guilty? Why on earth?
Well, that's how sensitive I was about it. I mean, because I probably desperately wanted to be a good guitarist, and I knew I wasn't. So that's where the guilt came in, see?
So a little bit of the imposter syndrome.
Totally, yeah. I had massive imposter syndrome, yeah, massive, yeah. And that lasted years and years, and I don't think it ever goes away. And I think if you ask any musician honestly, they'll probably agree, even a professional, which I'm not now anyway. They'll probably say something similar. Because every time you play and every time you record, you're only as good as your current performance.
Especially when you're standing in front of a crowd playing live.
And that's the other thing, of course. I was a bedroom guitarist for years, and apart from jamming with my mates. But, sitting on your bed and jamming away to status quo is good fun. Can be frustrating trying to figure it out, even though it's pretty basic music. But getting in front of people and projecting your music is terrifying. Absolutely terrifying, yeah. It was for me.
Yeah, so you had to delve into your confidence then to...
Yeah, you had to dredge up a bit of self-confidence. And that's when we were it was 1976 when we started, and that was when, those were the days of, really big hair. So I think, we all grew our hair out as much as possible then. And back then I had a lot of hair. And so I was you tend to hide behind your hair, I think, when you're on stage. So I had very big buffy hair and a moustache and a little goatee. I couldn't grow much of a goatee back then, but I had a go, yeah. And so you try to craft this persona, and I think you tend to hide behind that. Well, that's what I did.
So definitely your stage presence was different to your everyday.
Well, I still walked around with my hair, every day, but even in day-to-day life, when you're a 14-year-old, boy, and you're just recovering from the loss of a dad, I was going through difficult emotional times as well, and probably not very well emotionally balanced at the time. So, you're kind of hiding behind this persona, definitely, yeah, I was. And that's why music was so important to me. Well, not the only reason, but because I've always loved music, even before I wanted to play it. That's when it just became so extremely important to me, more important than anything else.
Yeah, it's sort of taken over your life. It's the thing that you can, because you're projecting, you almost become somebody else and can say more than you feel that you can when you're not there.
Yeah, I just felt like I had a lot to express too. At school I was a pretty good student, although I never really studied, and I was good at English and English expression, and I loved books from a very early age, so I've always been good at verbal expression, but I just decided that I needed to express myself musically. Something funny about that, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's not necessarily the first way of expressing yourself that you may have thought of.
No, it wasn't my native. It wasn't my native mode of expression. No, my native mode of expression was with words. Definitely, I was good with words even as a boy. Yeah.
And did it help?
Help what?
Help how you processed what you were going through.
Did it help me emotionally to deal with the loss of my parent? I just felt like I was honouring some kind of a deal with my father who'd passed away. Don't know where that came from. Obviously from his urgings, but he was never pushy about it. He was always polite. He was never pushy about wanting me to do it. Yeah, I don't know. It's just that's the way it was.
He was nodding in the direction but not pushing.
Yeah, that's right. He was always like that. He was never tried to force me to do anything.
And when you started to play, Did you find you had some sort of natural musical ability?
Initially, not really. And, the band was pretty terrible. And back then in those days, we had like pretty bad equipment and terrible scratchy little practice amps. And I mean, compared to these days, the gear is wonderful and it's fairly cheap too. But back in those days, it wasn't so cheap and it wasn't very good. So even the guitars wouldn't stay in tune, for example. We didn't even have guitar tuners, and we didn't really have good ears. So we were playing out of tune half the time. And yeah, it was terrible. Absolutely terrible, yeah. And we couldn't, and none of us could play when we started. So, put all that together.
But you got in and had a go anyway.
We had a red hot go, yeah. We were we were highly motivated.
So Nick, it sounds like the band was pretty terrible. Did you do anything about it?
Yep, we all agreed. Well, there were four of us. We agreed to get lessons, and we all did so at around the same time. Yeah. So we had two guitarists, a bass player, and a drummer. All wannabe players. So we went and got some lessons. Yeah.
And did it make a difference?
Yeah, I think it did, yeah. I was able to... well, actually, I forgot about my sister. Yeah, my sister was a good classical guitarist. She's 4 years older than me. I would kind of read her music books as well before I got lessons and do a bit of finger picking or try a bit of finger picking. We had this old book by this excellent Spanish guitarist, sort of written in the 30s, These music books, they still sell them now. Some of these old books that have been written in the 30s and people still use them to learn off now. So, yeah. So there was that Spanish guitar book, and I used to play my sister's guitar too before my mum got me my electric, yeah. I just remember that. So she was a big part in my education too. But then we went to proper guitar lessons in Box Hill, and that's when I kind of learnt, the basics, like, the names of the notes and the picking technique and that sort of thing, the fretwork technique. Yeah, so that sort of got me started. But I didn't last very long at those, no.
At the lessons?
No, I didn't do very many of them. I didn't want to be told what to play. I didn't like the stuff I was learning on. These sort of daggy old folk tunes and stuff. I wanted something really gutsy, like the music that we were listening to. Basically rock music. Yeah, I didn't like that very much, but it was worth doing. Yeah.
So it made some improvement across the band?
It must have. Yeah, it must have. I believe so.
It's a pretty big thing to get yourself effectively from nothing to at least being able to play and thinking maybe it's not as terrible as you thought you were.
Yeah, we got to a point, I'm not sure when, maybe the year after, 1977, where we were okay. That's when we were really studying the books, the songbooks, basically the status quo songbooks. But then we got hold of other songbooks like Led Zeppelin, which were a huge influence for me. Yeah, so the other songbooks, the rock songbooks, we managed to buy somehow with our pocket money. So once we got a hold of them, we could see the actual the notes and the chords and a bit of tablature. So that was very helpful too, yeah.
To help to get you on track from a musical perspective.
Yeah, and this was way, way, way before the internet, and when there was no videos, nothing like that. No kind of multimedia educational stuff. So it was all books. It was all from the actual record itself, which was back in those days vinyl. And we had cassettes. We would record on cassettes too, those little ones, on these crappy little boom boxes. So we got to hear ourselves play, kind of. Quite distorted it was. We even got to the point where we were able to multi-track using a couple of old crappy cassette decks, because the other the rhythm guitarist's dad was an electrician. Mal, who was the guitar player, was quite good with electricals, so he was able to bounce one track off the other, and we record everything down to a cassette. So that was very helpful, being able to multi-track using cassette decks so that we could sort of layer up our ideas. That was helpful. This was way before there were any affordable multi-track decks, and way before software too, of course.
So true innovation.
Yeah, that was quite clever actually what Mel was able to do back then, yeah. And then later on, another mate of mine who went to Melbourne Uni and was very good at electronics, studied electronic engineering. He drew up a design for a proper mixing desk, and so I was able to bounce. By that time, we had the horizontal decks, the twin cassette decks. So I was able to bounce from one deck to the other through this mixing board, which I built myself out of resistors and pots and things like that. So that was I was quite proud of that too. Yeah, there was a fair bit of innovation went into that too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I was able to get some pretty good sounds on that thing. But this is in the 80s, of course. This is much later.
Fantastic.
So that helped a lot.
I'll bet it.
Being able to layer tracks. It gave one inspiration to keep going, because sort of go, wow, that sounds all right. It sounds like music, not just banging away,
Because it's not just an individual instrument, it's the collection of everybody playing that really makes it sing.
Yeah, well, that's another thing with me. I've never been very keen on playing solo, and I'm still not. Maybe it's maybe it's shyness. I'm not sure, but I've always liked to be in some type of band, and I don't want to be the only person up there on stage. Definitely not. So there's a big difference there between the solo artist and the band member, I reckon.
Right, that's all. That's very interesting, Nick. Thank you for that. Next up, we'll have a look at what this means. So we've heard something of what it takes to be a musician. Now, let's have a look at what that means. So, Nick, what has being a musician meant for you, your family, or the community?
Right. For me, it's given me a lot of wonderful experiences which have helped me to enjoy life better, enjoy life more, and to receive a bit of recognition along the way has been wonderful, very good for my self-esteem, and to have people praise my playing, sometimes, not always, has been incredible. It's hard to describe how wonderful it is to have someone praise your music. So and how has that changed me? It's probably given me a greater sense of self-worth, yeah. Even though I get my self-worth from different areas of life, that's not the only thing that I've ever tried to do that's difficult. But that's probably the most emotional, yeah, it's the aspect of my life that requires the greatest amount of emotion. Let's say libido or life force. I mean, my other pursuits such as software programming are much more intellectual and cerebral, and they don't take as much energy. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very focused on the emotion. So very important part of how people feel that they're meeting some sort of life purpose as well.
Yes, and not just. It actually gives energy too. It generates energy within the body, and sometimes phenomenal amounts of energy. Like if you're playing in front of a hall, playing in a hall, for example, on a stage, and people are liking what you do, that can generate like powerful electricity. It's hard to explain how wonderful it feels. It's kind of like the best feeling ever. Yeah, it's like the best feeling on earth. And that's happened to me quite a few times, and I've been very lucky to experience that. And that's one of the things that makes me want to keep playing, maybe. I don't know. I mean, I'm not that keen to get in front of an audience again, but when I do, it's going to be a buzz. Pretty sure. A real buzz, that's what it is. Electric buzz. Yeah, that's what it does for you personally.
And I imagine that's also a buzz for your audience.
Well, yeah, I mean, if they're getting off on it, so am I, and it becomes like a feedback loop, yeah. Definitely, yeah. It's a massive feedback loop, positive feedback cycle.
That's the best kind.
Yeah, and the family and my family didn't know what to make of it. My mum was not keen on it, no, not at all. In fact, I mean, she was very supportive of me all the way through. She let us practice downstairs in the room, coincidentally, that my father and I actually dug out from under the house together. So that's another funny thing. We dug out this room underneath and concreted it up and turned it into a proper little room. But at the time, I didn't know what it was going to be used for, and neither did my dad. I mean, my dad wanted it, obviously, for his stuff. And then he passed away, and there was this big empty cool room downstairs under the house, and almost immediately we filled it up with gear and noise, lots of noise and lots of cigarette smoke. And I feel sorry for my poor mum because the kitchen was on top of the room. And yet she was very, very tolerant and very long-suffering. She never told us not to do it. She never told us to do it somewhere else. Unlike a lot of other parents who did. Like, for example, the other three guys in the band, generally their parents didn't want a bar. They didn't want any noise in their house ever. So it was left to my mum basically to put us up and feed us too. So she was wonderful in that sense, yeah, fantastic. Really generous. But she was never keen on me being a musician. Never at all. She wanted me to do something with a higher status, I guess. Yeah.
And I guess
better money too, and good money. I mean, of course, I've never made any decent money from it, So in that sense, I would describe myself as a perfect failure. A perfect failure at music, yeah.
You've got the skill and you've got the you've had rewards out of it, but you've not.
I've got some skills. I've had quite a few rewards from it, but no, not much money.
Yeah, that the money bit's left for that 1% you hear played on the radio day in, day out.
Yeah, well, I mean, I could go on about that, but it's not. It's self-destructive to blame others for your own failures. So I won't go down that road. I mean, I had lots of reasons for why I wasn't famous. A whole list of reasons why. For example, I told myself that if I was living in a big city in Europe, I would have been laughing, because there would have been decent audiences to come and hear the kind of music that we wanted to play, which was pretty well. I mean, by the time we were 21, it was quite complex. It was like prog rock. Do you know prog rock? Progressive rock.
Progressive rock.
Yeah.
What? Well, tell us an example.
Our bands, the bands that we were really. By the time I was in my late teens and early 20s, the bands that I was really loving were bands like Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd and Yes and Genesis and Rush. These prog rock bands who were playing some pretty interesting, symphonic type arrangements, and that's what I was getting into more and more and more. But our Aussie audience had a simpler taste in music. They wanted pub rock, basically. Back in those days, we're talking about the late 70s now, early 80s. Back in those days, it was pub rock and pretty basic 4/4 beats most of the time and pretty guitar heavy, which was good. But, I mean, by that stage, we had a keyboard player and it was going in a different direction. But, I mean, that's not the reason why. Well, actually, there was a very good reason why my second band failed. Quite a tragic reason. I suppose I should mention that too. That was in 1982. Yeah, that's right. So anyway, I've skipped over a lot of experiences. But anyway, when I was in 20 something, we'd been rehearsing in the Red Room, which was the room downstairs. We had red carpet on the walls. We've been rehearsing solid in the Red Room for 2 years, and we hadn't played a single gig, and yet our music was pretty good. And anyway, we for some reason we just said, okay, bugger it, let's do it, let's gig, let's play gigs, and we had a nice full set. So we got and we were able to get we did a demo with our mate, the electronics guy, and we were able, which was done on a reel-to-reel 4-track. And we were able to get gigs straight away, and they were pretty good ones too. And we had like about 10 gigs lined up, just like that.
Wow!
So we obviously must have been pretty good after they'd listened to our tape, of course. So we started playing gigs, and it was like absolutely mind blowing. And that's when the positive feedback loop started to happen. And the name of the band was Masque, MASQUE, which is a kind of a bit of a pretentious kind of a name for a fancy dress ball, that they used to have in Europe or whatever. I don't know. It was Tony's idea. He was the keyboard player. Now, that was the name of the band, and we were just starting to jam around Melbourne. And back in those days, it was 81, I think. Back in those days, pub rock was still big and club rock was pretty big, and we got gigs playing in clubs. And that was incredible. And we were getting some really good responses, and people were loving it. And then tragedy struck. Yeah. Tony and two of his mates who were very close friends of the band, kind of like roadies, I guess you'd call them. And they were roadies at the time, actually. And two of their girlfriends were driving after midnight sometime, and there was a car accident. And how many died? 3 people died. The 2 girls died, and Tony died in that accident. Wow. Yeah, that was huge. And the other 2 guys, the 2 roadies, Craig was very badly smashed up. And Glenn was the driver, and he came out of it the best. Because generally when you're driving, you're hanging, I don't know how, I think it must be hanging onto the steering wheel. Mm-hmm. But often the driver comes out of it the best, don't they? I believe so.
Yeah, often the way they steer around things and so on.
So that was that. Tony was dead.
Wow. And a key part of the band by the sound of things.
He was probably the most important member, yeah. He was probably the main guy at that time, because half of the songs were his, sort of pre-formed. The rest were mine and Steve's, the bass players. But I was very proud of my contributions as well. And I worked so well with Tony because, he was doing the symphonic kind of stuff, quite classically based, and I was doing the rockier stuff, and we were getting some really good, counterpoint going. Some good songs. We had a good singer, Larry. He was a good singer. He sounded a bit like that guy in Men at Work, yeah. He sounded quite a bit like Colin, that guy Colin from Men at Work. But anyway, that put a stop to that, and that stopped us cold. And suddenly there was Tony's keyboard set up in the corner of the room, the red room, just sitting there. No one to play it anymore.
Oh, that's one way to knock it on the head, isn't it?
That knocked it on the head, mate.
Wow. So lots of meaning there, lots of things lots of connection. Now that we've had a good look at that, next up we'll have a look at the steps that it takes to be a musician. So, Nick, we've talked a lot about what it means. What are the steps that you take to become a musician?
Okay, so the steps I took, as I said, was first of all, you've got to have the motivation. The drive comes first, and that I had a very strong drive there, somehow because of my dad. Number 2, and also because of a desire to impress the young ladies. So that's a big part of it. And then you've got to find people that you vibe with, basically friends. You've got to find some friends to play with. And that doesn't happen easily either. I mean, I've gone for years and years without finding anyone that I wanted to play with, and then suddenly, bang, I find somebody, and it's good. So you've got to find someone that you want to play with, and yeah, I mean, I guess you could just get online these days. Back in those days, it wasn't so easy to find. Everything was done through the newspapers, But yeah, it wasn't that easy to find people to jam with in those days, and it wasn't even that easy to get around because, before I even had a licence. So I was lucky that I had 3 friends that we all went to the same high school, and we all wanted the same thing, and we all did it. And we did that for until the end of high school. We played the high school dance, which was great fun. So that was about 4 years, yeah. We're probably together 4 years, which is a very long time for a young man, And that was great, but that reached its conclusion. And when people start to snipe at each other, that's when it's time to split up and try something different. So we started to snipe at each other in the end. I think we were frustrated because we weren't getting enough opportunities locally in our suburb, which was Bulleen Templestowe back then, and we didn't really have. We were just getting our driver's licences back then. I said we didn't really have the resources to sort of get around to gigs and that, yeah. And our parents didn't want to drive us all the time, so that kind of stalled for a while, and then we split up. So that was the first band anyway. So anyway, what does it take? Well, it takes a lot. It takes resources, definitely. You need. We never really had a manager, and in hindsight, we needed a manager. We really did. So, to any young bands out there, I'd recommend find yourself a manager for sure. Manager agent, yeah. That's what we never had for our first band. If you get one of them who's keen to help you out, you're very lucky. And you need somewhere to practice, which is conducive to your creative process. And we were lucky we had that too. We had a good concrete room, carpeted, soundproofed to practice in. Didn't annoy the neighbours too much. That's important. What else do you need? Talent, but I think talent's kind of overrated. I think if you're intelligent enough, you can pick up pretty much any skill, I reckon, including musicianship, if you push yourself hard enough. Of course, a natural prodigy, I'm not. And those natural prodigies, they tend to pop up in musical families, I've noticed. Their parents tend to be working musicians and they play every day as a matter of course in the house. So they grow up, with music in the house and people who are making music in front of them. I think that's the big gap between your average muso like me and your prodigy. So to have that early exposure to making music is priceless. But of course you can't make that to order.
Yeah, that's one of those things that you've got to be born into the right spot almost.
Yeah, I mean, actually, some say that we reincarnate. So maybe we do that. Maybe some people do that. Maybe some people choose the family they want to be. They choose a musical family that they want to be born into, so that they can develop their skills more. Who knows? I don't know why I chose my family. They weren't very musical.
Oh, there must have been some other benefits.
Yeah. So as well as that, you need lessons. Yeah, it's good to get lessons. Although I didn't do very well at my lessons because I didn't want to be told what to play. But if you're good at taking orders, then get some lessons for sure. But then on the other hand, some of my heroes never took lessons. Some of my musical heroes never took lessons. So there you go. You just can't account for some things. Self-confidence, that's what you need, and lots of it.
You're putting yourself out on a stick, really, aren't you?
You're putting yourself out there in front of people, and sometimes people say they hate what you do, and sometimes they say they love what you do. So basically just focus on the people who say they love what you do and ignore the trolls. That's what I do on YouTube. I just ignore the troll, just block the trolls and absorb the love from the audience.
Try and feed that positive feedback
Get
cycle.
that positive cycle buzzing again, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Nick. It's been fascinating talking to you about music and how it's the highest form of magic.
It is. I think so. Thanks for having me anyway, Paul, and I hope the listeners to your podcast can get some benefit from my experience. And I wish them all the best luck in the world, whatever they want to do.
Thank you very much, Nick. You've been listening to Forest.chat, where we talk about individual endeavour in Western Australia, what it takes, what it means, and how you do it. I'm your host, Paul Vandermeer, and in today's episode, we talked with Nick Theodore about music, the greatest kind of magic. Remember, there are 4 ways you can get involved with Forest.chat. Share the domain forest.chat with your friends and family and people you meet. Listen to the published episodes at forest.chat/episodes. Book an interview at forest.chat/interview. Book an advert at forest.chat/advert. I'm looking forward to joining you with our next interview. Until next time, enjoy making it happen.